Hi everyone. I hope you've had a good Monday. We're just waiting. We'll just wait a couple of seconds here for everyone to join up. It does look like we have a few people in here now, but we'll just make sure that we're set with everyone joining. I know it looks like we're still waiting for a few. Um, so those of you who haven't done a webinar in this platform before, I'll just say a couple of things. So you will notice that there is a Q&A. There is also a chat. So at any point you can use either one of those features. I can just tell you quickly about the difference. So the Q&A is private, so it's just between me and you. And the chat is for the entire group. So if you have something to share, if you have a question for anybody in the group, then you can ask it in the chat. But if you just want to ask a question to me, I will. You can do it in the Q&A. With that being said, I'll try my best to get to the Q&A during the webinar. But if I don't, I'll definitely get at you afterwards. Okay. Okay. All right. So it looks like we're good. So we'll get started. And I do see a couple questions coming in already, and I'll make sure that I try to get to those, like I said. Okay, so today we're really going to start talking about spiraling your math. So spiral reviews, daily spiral reviews. So I guess before we actually get started, I do want to ask, where we're at with that. So first of all, let me ask you a couple of questions. So first of all, what grade do you teach? And then also, do you currently use daily spiral reviews for math? So I'm going to launch that now. Go ahead and answer those questions, just so I can kind of get a feel of where we're at with spirals already. All right, so it looks like grade levels taught, we have third, fourth, fifth, and then we have an other as well. And I should have went up to sixth, I suppose. So do you currently use daily spiral reviews? It looks like 40% say yes and 60% say no. Okay, all right, so that's great. So for those of you who have used spiral reviews or are currently using them, hopefully we can get you some ideas of things that you can do in your classroom where you can try. And then for those who don't, we'll share what we do already. With that being said, I want this to be more of a workshop. So if you have ideas, if you have things that you want to share with us, by all means, I'm not the official expert on spiral reviews. So I'm going to share what I do and what works, but I also would love to hear what you do and what works with you as well. Okay, let's see here. So let's get started. I'll just show you a quick overview of what we're going to talk about tonight. So we did our introduction and our poll, and then we are going to talk about the intro to math spiral. So we'll talk a little bit about why we should do math spirals, and then also we'll talk about what math spirals look like in my classroom. After that, we'll talk about the daily routine, and we'll talk about the different types of spiral review that the ways that you can use them in your classroom. And then how to use the data that you're getting from the spirals, and then we'll finish up with some questions as well. Okay, and like I said, if you have any questions whatsoever, by all means, go ahead and you can type those in, and I'll try to get those answered. Okay. All right, so the power of the spiral review. So we'll talk quickly about what the spiral review is, and also why we should be using them. First of all, they're quick, and that's what it's supposed to be. In the very beginning of the year, and those who are using spirals already, you probably know this. They take a little bit longer towards the beginning of the year because the kids, they're coming back and they're dragging a little bit. And some of the stuff, it's supposed to be a true spiral of things that they've learned before in math. And sometimes they come back and they're like, I don't remember any of this. So those things that were supposed to be a spiral, they actually turn into to teaching, to true instruction. So they're supposed to be quick, but I think that you'll find at the beginning of the year that sometimes they take a bit more time. They're amazing confidence boosters for students, especially as the months go on. As the month goes on, I should say, not months. So the great thing about spirals, if you're doing a 20-day, my spirals that I use, there's a packet of 20. And towards the beginning of the month, I always find that they're a little challenging for the kids because, that is a review of the prior month. So some of the kids have it, some of the kids just need a little bit more practice. But what you're going to find throughout the month, especially towards the end of the month, is that those skills that the kids are working on, because they are spiraled and because they continue working on them every single day on those same standards, by the end of the month, the kids have it. Most of the kids, they're gaining the confidence there because they're getting them right towards the end of the month. Whereas at the beginning of the month, maybe they are a little more challenging. They're helping you see where your students are falling down and where they need a little bit more help. And also, I want to make it very clear here. One of the huge things that I hear about spirals is this is a canned sheet that you're giving the kids, and when you give this to the kids, you're seeing at the end of the month how the kids did overall. Well, that's one of the things that we need to make sure we're doing as teachers. You're looking at these spirals, not just at the end of the month to see how the kids did fully, for those entire 20 days, but you need to be looking at all times. And if you see kids are really falling down on a specific standard, then stop with that student. And maybe that's where, the spiral is not going to be what that child needs, but really that student is going to need a little more intense support. If you see that kids are falling down, maybe they don't just need the spiral. Maybe they need something a little more than that as well. And in my school, when I see that a student is really struggling with a specific standard on the spirals, and it was already fully taught the month before, that's when I bring in, and I'm sure that not all of us are in the same place with RTI, but that's when I start using, I start saying to myself, okay, does this child need to be referred to the RTI committee? And then we'll really focus in with either me or a specialist in the school to start helping with them with RTI. Maybe a separate pullout is needed. And in a lot of cases, if students are really struggling with this, then usually what I'll do is I'll say to that student, maybe he or she just needs a little more intense support, and that student will get a small group either with me or with that intervention specialist. The repetition is going to help your students all year long. So the best part of this for me, and the number one thing that I hate, is test prep right before the test, right? So if we're teaching the way we should, and if we're doing spirals just like this, where it's, we're spiraling those standards all year long, there's not really much of a need for test prep because you're already doing the test prep throughout the year. So that's honestly, for me, that's what I love the most, because you're not wasting time right before the test to just stop and just go over that test prep. So over the last 3 years, my students have grown tremendously with this model, and I really truly do believe that. We had an outside math specialist come into our building, and she really was the one who got my district started probably about 5 years ago with spiral reviews, and we started making our own spiral reviews. And that is something that about 3 or 4 years ago, we started creating our own for our district. And actually, I was making them at home and then taking them to school and giving them to my grade level. And that's helped a big time. And I will say this just before we go any further. So I'm going to show you what my math spiral reviews look like, and I'll tell you where you can try those out and where you can get those. But I also want to say that they may not work for you, and I want to be very clear about that, because there were a lot of spiral reviews that we looked at before we decided that we needed to create our own, and a lot of those spiral reviews were not fantastic because they didn't go along with the pacing that we did in our district, or we use well, actually, we've used a couple of different math programs in the last couple of years. And those programs, they went in a different order. So you may very quickly find that, you need to make your own spiral reviews because of that, because you want something that is going to go along with your, curriculum that you actually teach. Okay. So let me tell you what mine look like, my spiral reviews look like, and actually how I set it up too. So what I do is we do our spiral review for the first beginning of the year. We usually do about 15 minutes of math. There definitely have been days where it's turned into 20 minutes or so. But then there are days where we get it done in 10 minutes. It really depends. So the spiral reviews that I have, and I'll show you little snippets of the ones that I use, they all have 8 questions. I have them for 3rd grade, and I actually started making them for 4th grade as well. So 3rd grade, they're completely done because I've been in 3rd grade for a few years. And like I said, I've just started working on the 4th grade ones as well. They all have 8 problems on them. So at the beginning of every month, so there's a full packet of 20 pages, and I just make a packet for the kids. I will say that it does take up some paper, but it is nice. It's super easy for the kids just to have that packet that I can say, okay, let's start with our spiral today, and they take out their spiral and they have that in front of them. So at the beginning of your packet, so this isn't in the student's packet actually. You could put it in there, I suppose. You'll see that it does have the standard that's being addressed. So on day the first question, this is actually for a September packet. it's addition and subtracting, and estimating and rounding. So then number 2, basic multiplication and division, and then number sense. So it goes through each time. Not all of the problems are the exact same, but they revolve around that specific standard. Okay. Actually, I think this is the first one. I should say this. This is the first one for 4th grade. This isn't this one that I'm showing you right now is not for is not for 3rd grade, especially with the division, right? Or multiplication for that matter. So the standards are in the beginning. They're 20-day packets with 8 questions per day. There's a data tracking page completed by the students, which I'll show you in just a couple of seconds. And then there's an end of the month reflection, which I want to show you as well. And that was huge for me. The end of the month reflection is probably, spirals are important, but without that reflection, without actually having the kids talk about, what they did well and what they still need to improve on, well, does it really matter that much? I don't know. So we need to make sure that we're reflecting at the end of the month. So let me show you what the actual spiral looks like. So this is basically it. They have the answers over on the side. The answer boxes over on the side, and then they have the questions here. So they actually answer these. And you'll notice that these spirals, I will just quickly say this. If you're going to make your own spirals, just be careful of the fonts you're using. This one I actually changed. This one, the font was a little tough to read, and there were some of my kids had a little bit of a tricky time reading this font. So be careful with the fonts you use. Yes, they're cute, but also, maybe some of your kids will struggle with that a little bit. So they have the 8 problems, and they usually know which ones are going to be easy for them and which ones are going to be a little more challenging. So they adjust with time. I will go back a couple slides here. I just want to say this. So let's talk about how I'm actually giving these to my kids. So there are some days where I actually will put just up on the board and say, okay, today you're going to do your spiral, and it's going to be independent work. So you're going to do it by yourself. And that allows me, when that's happening, it allows me to kind of free me up, and I can bring a small group of kids who I know are struggling with a specific standard or a specific problem. I can bring them over to me in a small group. So I kind of use it, it's like guided math basically, right? So you have guided reading, you're working with that small group. Same thing here. I can bring a group over and work with a specific group of kids who maybe I know are struggling with a couple of these standards. Buddy work, I think that's probably my students, their favorite way to do the spirals. They love getting in a group with a buddy or 2 sometimes, and they're working on these with a buddy. And usually I do put them with students who I know they're going to do well with. But there are some days too where I'll just let them work with somebody that they want, so a friend. And that works out well too. I have used these in centers before too, so that is an option. So I could, if we're doing math centers and we're kind of discussing the things that we've learned in the last week, and I have a bunch of centers set up, a spiral may be one of those centers. Something I didn't put on here, and I should mention this as well. I have had some teachers say that they've used this for homework as well. So if you really don't think you have too much time in class to be doing a spiral, because your curriculum is pretty demanding and you have you don't have a lot of time anyways, then this could be something that you could use for homework. I don't use it for homework. I've never used it for homework, but I've heard some people say that they've used it for homework, and it's worked out really well, and especially because it's all there for you, and it is supposed to be a spiral of the things that the kids have learned in the past. So it shouldn't be overly difficult. They should be able to do it by themselves because of that. But that's just another option as well. So let me go back forward here. So yeah, this is what it looks like. The kids know that every day those boxes, they do know the standards that are inside of those boxes. And I make it a point to say, okay, you know what? Which one are you struggling with? And the kids are like, oh, the word problem, number 8, because they always know number 8 is the word problem. Or number 5, typically in 3rd grade, for most of 3rd grade, and actually the 4th grade ones too, they're always fraction related in some way. So the kids are very aware of what types of problems are in the spiral as well. So let me show you this, because this is probably one of my favorite parts of the spiral, and I added this a few years ago when that math specialist came into our room, and I absolutely love it. I think the best part about any spiral that I've ever used, including the ones that I'm using now, is this sheet. So the self-tracking sheet, and the students actually do this themselves. So you can do a couple of things. There are some days where I know I don't have a lot of time, so I'll put the answer key up on the board, and the kids go up and they self-correct it up on the board, and then I'll walk around and kind of help the kids out a little bit with if they have questions, or if there's something that they really didn't get, or you know how this goes as well, right? If you see that a large number of kids got this wrong, then you're going to stop and say, okay, mini lesson, because we need to really start talking about number 6 today, because most people miss that problem. So as they look at the answer key, or as I talk about answers with the kids, they either shade in 3 different colors. They shade in 3 different colors on this on the sheet, on the self-tracking sheet. So they have either green, yellow, or red. And at the beginning of the year, this is a little tricky for kids with the yellow. Okay, so green and red are super easy, because green, it's totally right. They understood it. They're good to go. The red is they got it wrong. They really don't understand it. They probably need a little more assistance with it. But the yellow is they may have got the question. Maybe they got it right, but they still don't understand why. Or maybe they got it wrong, but it was a very silly mistake. So that yellow is like, yeah, I probably, it's somewhere in the middle there. Either I'm not sure what I was totally doing and I got it right, or I probably just need a little more help with this. Either way. So that's what the yellow is. So towards the beginning of the year, the kids are asking me a lot. Do you think this is yellow? And I'm like, well, was it a silly mistake, right? I mean, that's the first question I asked. Do you think that you would have got it right if you would have just slowed down with that addition, or something along those lines? So they fill in these. The best part about this is, you can look at this. You can just say to the kids, okay, guys, we're done today with Spiral, but I want everybody to open up their data tracking sheet. And then you can just quickly walk around with a piece of paper and write down, maybe some of the kids that are struggling with specific standards. And then you can pull them over the next day in that small, guided math group, and you can actually work with that specific problem with those students. So I would definitely say, this is a little tricky in the beginning, but it's probably one of the best pieces of the Spiral, because it is very easy for the kids to see, but it's also easy for me to see, and also for parents to see. The other thing that's great about this is your RTI meeting. So if you do have RTI at your schools, RTI, this is perfect data. You can take it to your meeting and say, okay, this is it right here. Like I have, question number 4, my students are rounding and estimating, and they're really falling down in that area. So you have specific proof of, that individual standard that the students are struggling with. And then, hopefully you have some ideas of how to solve it as well. And sometimes all it takes is just working in a small group with that student or students to help them with those. So this is the student, or the self-tracking sheet that comes along with it. And I just see that a couple of people tuned in here too, and you just walked in the room. So let me just explain. So the green, if a student gets a question right, they shade the box in green. Yellow is maybe there was a silly mistake, or maybe they got it right, but it was they're not quite sure why they got it right. Maybe it was just a good guess. And then the red is they got the question wrong and they really don't understand it. Okay. All right. So this is the sheet that we use at the end of the month. So the reflection sheet. We use this the very last day of that month's Spiral. So there's 20 days. We'll either do it on the 20th day, or we'll do it that next day, just depending on how much time is left. And the kids look at their sheet, and they look at their self-tracking sheet, and they say how many greens they got, and how many yellows they got, how many reds they got. And typically, I don't think I've ever had a student who had more yellows and reds than they did greens. Usually, especially because this is a Spiral and because you're working on those same standards every day, most of the kids in the class are doing a pretty good job with this. So they're going to have an overwhelming number of greens, which again, that goes into that confidence boosting. The kids really look at this and they feel good about it, because they know that they've grown throughout the month. This is like actual proof on paper that they've grown throughout the month. And it's easy for the kids to understand because they can tell by color. So this is the sheet we use, like I said, at the very end of the month. So the next one, which area have you had the most amount of growth in? Which area do you think you still need some help with? List the areas that you feel like you have mastered. And again, I added that one just because I want to boost the kids' confidence there. So this is just a 1-page. I did make a digital copy of this too, and I didn't use that last year, but this year we have Chromebooks. So I'm going to have the kids fill this out online. I'm going to have the kids fill this out online in Google Slides. So, all right. So using the data. So we talked about this a little bit on the last slide already. So you're using the that data as needed. You're also checking it throughout the month. Make sure that at the end of the month you can also see what's went well, maybe what hasn't went well with the students, where they really are falling down. And again, just be very careful with this, because you want to make sure that you are checking throughout the month, because if a student is really falling down on one of those areas, one of those standards, you want to get them some immediate help. And a lot of times, if I see the kids are getting red every single day in a specific area, even by the middle of a month, I'll be like, okay, we need to do something more. Like, they're practicing it every day, but if they're not getting it when they're practicing, then something else is going on, right? Practice makes perfect, but if they're still not getting it after 5 days, then I know, there's still something up, and we need to get to the bottom of that. So, and then student usage, we talked about that a little bit already too. So they're seeing their learning through colors, and they're using that data reflection page at the end of the month. This is also perfect. I will tell you, this is fantastic to bust out during parent-teacher conferences. So the parents, they're looking at this report card, and I don't know about everyone here, but my report card, it's not the best report card ever. And, it doesn't have a ton of information on it as far as the actual report card itself. It just has a rubric score. So the things like this, I love pulling things out like this at conferences, because I can very clearly, again, very easily show parents, using these colors, where the kids are doing well and where they're kind of falling down. So for parent-teacher conferences, these are awesome. I sometimes send these home at the end of the month, but there are other times, if I know I have a parent-teacher conference coming up, I'll just stick them in the kids' folders and have it ready for conferences as well. So that is an idea, just to have those. So I do want to just ask if you have any questions, and I'm also, if you want to use the chat to ask questions, you can definitely do that. And I want to talk to you about a couple other things if you do have questions, you can ask those as well. So I will talk about this quickly. So like I said, I do have the 4th grade available now, the 4th grade Math Spiral Review available. The 3rd grade has been available for a while. There's a whole bundle of, there's one for every single month. The 4th grade, it is a growing bundle, so I'm just going to make one per month, and then I'll add it so you have it for the next month. The month 1 is already there, so it's in the bundle already. These 2 links right here, I'll leave this up here for a few minutes here. I am going to leave these up here just so you can use those links. You can get a free 5 days. So you can get 5 days just to see if it's something that you would even be interested in. And like I said, I just want you to understand, and I think probably a couple people missed this from the beginning, but I do want to make it very clear. No other spiral reviews really worked for us. We looked everywhere for spiral reviews, and because of our pacing, because of what we were teaching and when, we wanted to make our own. Okay, so our district, we decided our 3rd grade, we decided that we were going to make our own, and actually almost our entire elementary school, they've started making their own spiral reviews. Maybe you want to, maybe this will work for you, and the other thing is this, when you're looking at that spiral review, maybe you're looking at it and saying, you know what, we didn't really cover that one question yet. So maybe every day, instead of doing 8 questions, you only do 7 questions. You can cross one out too. But like I said, this goes along with, I live in New York State. This goes along with, it is Common Core aligned, although I did not put the Common Core standards on the physical document. So the one that the kids have in front of them, the Common Core standards are not on there. Just because I knew last year things were changing, and we didn't know where the standards were going, and if there was even going to be a Common Core. So they kind of are aligned to that. However, it's actually not listed. It's not actually listed on there. It is in the document that's provided if you do buy it from TPT, from Teachers Pay Teachers. It is in there, but it's not on the physical document itself. Okay. All right. So a couple of questions. You're using the data sheets for parent-teacher conferences. I do. So the data sheets, we fill those out. The kids fill those out, and then we actually do bring those to parent-teacher conferences. I bring them with me. There are times, and I'm not sure how your parent-teacher conferences work, but there are times in my school where we invite the students to the conferences as well. So that's actually just a really good way to bring the kids in and say, okay, tell your mom about how you're doing with math, and where you're doing well, and maybe where you're kind of you need a little more help. So that is something that I do use during conferences. Notice you have it in a folder or notebook. Where do your students store them? That's a good question. My kids actually have them pretty much all the time. They keep them in their math folders. We have a different color folder for every single subject. so the kids know that they can just pull those out. Now, there are some days where I do collect these because I don't have time to look at them, walk around and make sure everybody's doing okay. So I do collect them sometimes, and just, make little notes, or, take some anecdotal notes on the side for myself to know which kids I need to focus on the next day. So that is something that, I do as well. But yeah, typically they're keeping it inside of their folders. Okay. So I have fourth grade. What are you basing the content off of? So couple of things here. So this information is the way that we have our math curriculum set up. So we start with the basics, and we did look at, I won't mention the program that we use in math, but our math curriculum that we actually have, we've based it pretty much on that. But it's also, in general, it's almost what every series goes by. So, we're starting off with place value, then addition and subtraction. Then we head into multiplication a little bit. So every series is pretty much doing generally the same things from the beginning to the end of the year. So that's basically what what these are based on. But there's also some things in there, and let me just give you an example, like fractions. Like very beginning of third grade, the kids are, they don't know a ton of fractions. They just know very little from second grade. I think the second grade standard that goes along with fractions, I think, partitioning fractions or partitioning shapes, very simple things. So there are fractions in there, which is the great thing, because then when you are ready to actually teach fractions, the kids at least have a little bit of background. So these were made in a way that takes into account what they've already known in second grade, and then we just scaffold it to third and fourth grade levels. So I hope that kind of answers your question. Differentiation. So that's actually a very good question as well. So for the differentiation piece of this, the last 2 years I've had a special ed teacher in with me, and we'll do a couple of things. We have a little area where there's a ton of manipulatives. We have things that the kids can actually use. With the spiral, there's not a different version. All of the kids are actually doing the same exact questions. Really, the differentiation is coming in when the kids are working either with me, or they're working with the special ed teacher, and we're kind of breaking it down even further into greater detail with those kids. I would say by the end of the month, by the end of the month, I would definitely say that the kids are pretty much all in the same place as far as a spiral is concerned, because it is, you're spending an entire month spiraling all these concepts. The kids get it by the end of the month, even with some support. A lot of the support that we actually have to give the kids during spiral time is for the reading, to be honest. Most of my kids last year, they did really well with math, especially if we're giving them those tools to use. But a lot of the help that we had to give my kids in the last couple of years was really the reading help, especially with the word problems, and definitely the word problems. And like I said, is if you're making your own spirals, just be careful with the fonts as well, just to make sure that the kids are using those fonts you're using the fonts that the kids are going to be able to read easily. Let's see. What do you do with the rest of the work in the packet at the end of the month if you are holding the data sheets? That's a good question too. So it really depends on that too. And I will say that I've done a few different things. Sometimes I will give it to, after we're finished with the packet, I will send it home so the parents can see what we did for the entire month. And then there are times where I will keep that entire packet, including the work, especially if I know a student is going to be headed to RTI. I will keep that in my folder, in my file, just so I can have that documentation to back it up as well. How much time do you set aside each day to complete the spiral review? Again, there's a lot of it depends here, because in the beginning of a month, I would say it's going to take you closer to 20 minutes. Middle of the month, end of the month, it's probably going to take you closer to 10. So it depends. It also depends on how you do it. If you do it as a whole class, then it's probably going to take less time. If you're doing it, in small groups, then it might take a little more time. But I would say anywhere from 10 to 20 minutes. 10 to 20 minutes. Okay. All right. Sounds good. I think that's all the questions you had. So if you have any other questions, please let me know. You can always email me as well. My email address is, and I didn't put it up here, but it's danmalt@gmail.com. So it's mault@gmail.com. So if you have any questions that I didn't answer here, if you want to ask privately, you can definitely do that. And then, like I said, if you want to try out those spirals just to see if it's something that you'd want to do in your classroom or in your district, those are there. Those samples are there as well. And thanks for joining. Have a great start to your school year. Thanks.